This video is dedicated to a dangerous trend that is emerging more and more in online community. Specifically, I'm talking about content creator platforms such as YouTube. So what is the trend that I'm talking about? What I'm observing and also sensing from the stance of energy is that more and more new YouTube channels are popping up where women are portrayed to be basically blamed for everything. Men are leaving, women are losers, failures, desperate, they have no value, and now it's time for them to pay for their past mistakes. It's some sort of like a revenge almost. The energy feels like a revenge. Saying that, I absolutely acknowledge the fact that there are many problems on both sexes, men and women. And both needs a lot of healing, and both are acting from childhood traumas, multiple insecurities, or different sorts of dysfunctional patterns that needs to be addressed at this time. And yes, there are super toxic, narcissistic, abusive behavior coming from women as well. It's true. I'm not denying that at all. And the energy that I'm currently feeling, observing the online community, is basically there's this almost like a war happening between men and women. On one side, it's like, I'm right and you're wrong. And the same comes from the other side. So it's like from women's side, you could say like the extreme form is feminism, and also from men there are some extreme examples and movements happening right now, including red pill. In this type of situation, what is happening when one side is poking the other side in the eye and saying, I told you, you screwed up. What is happening that the other side is getting pushed even further away, and instead of bridging the gap gets widened even more. To be honest, I see this as child consciousness manifesting. Always want to be right, always wants to prove him or herself, which is a character trait of a child. We all remember when we grew up in childhood, we were competing and fighting for this conditional love from other people. We wanted always to be right, we wanted to do things always right, we didn't want to make mistakes, we wanted to win always, want to be in the first place, wanted to look good, right? And yeah, that's happening when child is developing, growing, and the ego or the mental sense of self is developing, the identity, who am I, who I am not. So yeah, this is all child consciousness. What I see right now, this childlike consciousness among adults, it's almost used like a weapon or weaponized, and it's very dangerous, because if one side tries to make the other side the enemy or wrong, what that does is that turns the other side into more and more defensive mode, because nobody wants to be publicly shamed or called out or lose his or her face and perceived as inadequate, that's true. Even if it is true, but still nobody wants to experience that. And this makes the side that gets bashed to double down even more. Even if it's ridiculous or out of reality. Because it's like a defensive coping mechanism. Not to address the pain. And it's like almost exercising a mental gymnastics where the side that gets bashed or perceives that the side gets attacked, what it does is it tries to find a way to how to approve self and diminish the other side, even if the other side's argument is valid. And the other side gets basically demonized or sometimes even defamed. This creates a vicious circle because both sides have this mutual reciprocity towards each other. I do blow to you, you do blow to me, and this continues on and on and on again. We can see that clearly distrust among men and women are increasing. The gap is widening. And instead of trying to understand the other side, the choice is being made to assert one's own opinion, assumption over the other. Often, always wanting one's own view to be recognized as the only truth, the only valid truth. And this combative nature drags more and more people into extremes more commonly than before. Because people are trying to prove the other side that it sucks, it is not needed, it is trash, completely useless, no value whatsoever, or other labels that are being used in this war. I acknowledge that resentment, bitterness, or any other feeling, it's valid and it should never be repressed. Never. And we should always strive to work with our feelings. And yes, there are also times when the message of living alone is also true, because there are times when we need to heal ourselves, and the best place or environment for that is to live alone. So there are no distractions, you can focus on yourself, etc. Yes, that is true. I sense that behind this type of attitude, there is often strong feelings of resentment and bitterness. Long-term attitude of, we don't need you, eventually it is going to backfire really hard. And we can see that society is already being ripped apart right now. We can just observe how it's getting more and more increasingly difficult, especially for young people, to have, and not anymore even young people, to have a genuine, meaningful, healthy, intimate relationships and experiences. It's incredibly difficult. We see growing numbers of sexless people, childless people, people who are confused with their identities, and so on. So when we live alone, we can heal ourselves, and we can then in the future attract more healthy version of our mate. Clearly, we don't want to put up with a shit. But if we judge others as being incapable of healing themselves, growing, evolving, maturing, then what we are doing is basically we are isolating huge part of society. And by huge, I'm saying majority of society up to this day, still right now, are living through multiple dysfunctional patterns that stems from childhood trauma. That's the reality. While I believe that all of our responsibility is to address our own traumas and heal them as much as possible, it's not who ultimately we are. Even though we like to judge others by their actions, but we need to remember also that people's actions also stem from traumas, from unhealthy, dysfunctional patterns, which is not who ultimately they are. And there is room for improvement. Exposing the unhealthy patterns are fine, but if we are building our following on the premise that the other side is has no value, cannot offer anything in life besides her beauty or beautiful body, and the other side deserves complete rejection, then that will only push the other side even more into extremism. Because if the message that one of the sides get, or both sides get, is you have no value, you suck, then it's bad. And yes, there are lots of women who have unrealistic expectations of men, who are asking for the ultimate package of the best man version possible, while in reality these women have not done the work themselves, because they are not embodying their best versions of themselves. So no wonder that they cannot attract the better version of a man. And yes, there are women who, with these unrealistic expectations, try to overcompensate their own insecurities and traumas as an avoidance mechanism, to go from one extreme, like low self-esteem, to like the other extreme, which is this super delusional hyper state. And yes, there are also women who refuse to acknowledge their own input in this equation, that they also need to put in the work, and they instead turn their attention to men, blaming men, while this is also happening in men's community, blaming women. So you can see there are extremes on both sides. Both sides are not willing to fully acknowledge their own wounds. And trust me, there are lots of wounds, or layers of wounding. And both sides instead focus to the other side. And often what is happening, both sides are projecting their own traumas or insecurities onto other side, which is distorted perception of the other. And focusing on the flaws of other, while often the other is mirroring own flaws. Blaming other is way easier than simply to remember to work on yourself. It's tempting, especially if the other side has triggered us or has done some wrong in our own perception. It's easier to try to justify our own stance when we get triggered, or when our deeper pain or insecurities get triggered by the other side. It's just these are the defense mechanisms and avoidance basically to work on your own. Those men who view themselves as totally healed are no less delusional than women that they expose as delusional. So in order to bridge the gap, simply mental gymnastics won't cut it, because there is also a huge component of emotional part in this. And we just simply have to also acknowledge emotions as valid, because they are good indicators and they help us to trace even deeper our own inner insecurities, traumas, our wounds that needs to be addressed. So emotions serve as a guiding mechanism into all of this. Emotions can help us to guide us to this root cause of why we are, for example, acting defensive or dismissive of the other one. So they are very important. Awareness of one's own core wounding is crucial to bridge the gap, because then we can become more and more observant when there are, for example, a time when a trigger is occurring, but we're aware of it and we are not completely overrun or overtaken by it. We can recognize it. It's the wounding. The wounding is present right now within me. Or sometimes you can see that in other person, like, oh, the other person is now like triggered into a reaction that is coming from a wounding, right? So there is potential for more compassion. We all have to recognize that all of us have some form of resistances towards change. That's how it is. And we constantly need to address these resistances if we want to evolve, if we want to grow, if we want to step out of the comfort zone, to try something new, to experience something different in life. We have to address the resistances in order to level up in all areas of our life. That's how it is. It used to be that universe was more patient and allowed people to grow at their own pace and timeline, but now it seems that more and more increasingly people on a collective level are getting forced to really face their own shit, and the space for avoiding is getting smaller and smaller. So it's kinda do or die. It's a good news, because that can propel many people into like awakening. If we continue to participate in this mutual war of sexes, men versus women, then yes, I feel like the only losers will be us, both sexes. And I feel that this is also deliberately created as a control mechanism to weaken the whole society through division, basically. And through this division, we see manifesting like this larger and larger collective of lonely individuals that are completely cut off from this healthy expression of community, of connection with other people. And instead of cooperation, of connection, there's this mentality of like everyone is each for himself. And this is how we get slaved, one by one, individually. If we unite as collective, then none of this shit can happen. And the king, the true king, divine, matured, healthy king also needs a queen. And through this companionship, then the creation at its fullness can be made. Thank you for watching and listening.